It had been nearly 4 months since Daniel disappeared, but the Taylor family had not been destroyed. Grief reshaped them, but it did not hollow them out. Instead, they leaned into each other, Luke and Lisa moving back onto the farm, folding their lives into the quiet rhythm of Caroline and Thomas's days. There were still nights when the silence felt like punishment, and mornings when someone would instinctively set 6 plates instead of 5. But time, like the Alabama soil, gave back what it took if you tended it long enough. They missed Daniel every day, yet somehow they believed, knew, that he would be proud of the life they'd built in his absence. In laughter shared across the dinner table, in the way Libby ran barefoot through the cotton rows, in the soft music that filled the house during Sunday chores, they honored him not with mourning, but with living. The cicadas had started early that evening, their rising chorus wrapping the Taylor farm in a thick, humming stillness that made the air feel heavier than it should. Lisa stepped out of her car, the late summer sun still clinging to the horizon, casting long gold-pink shadows across the gravel driveway. The sight of the dark SUV parked beside the porch stopped her mid-step. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't family. Her pulse quickened. She pushed open the front door and immediately felt it, the weight in the room. 2 strangers in crisp suits sat in her living room like fixtures from another world. One, a clean-cut man with a scar beneath his left eye, stood quietly near the window. The other, a woman with sharp eyes and a softer posture, sat on the edge of the couch beside Luke, who had buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Lisa didn't know what this was, but she knew what it felt like. Loss, dread, the beginning of something irreversible. The woman looked up as Lisa entered and gave a small, solemn nod. "You must be Lisa," she said gently. "We have news about your brother-in-law." Luke lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed, and spoke without looking at Lisa. "They found Danny." The woman continued, her voice measured. "He's alive, Lisa. We have him in our custody." "Alive?" Lisa's voice cracked, a mixture of disbelief and hope. "But where? How?" The woman's voice was calm, but each word landed like a falling brick. "Daniel was found 3 months ago," she said, her eyes never leaving Lisa's. "Near the Chinese border. He was discovered at the edge of a mass grave. Dozens of bodies, all unidentifiable. He was the only one still alive." Lisa's knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the edge of the doorframe. "His injuries were extreme," the woman continued gently. "Fractured skull, collapsed lung, extensive internal trauma. They didn't think he'd make it through the first night, and even when he stabilized, he remained in a coma for over a month. When he finally woke up, he had no memory of who he was." Lisa shook her head, trying to breathe through the sudden suffocating tightness in her chest. Luke was silent now, eyes red, fists clenched on his knees. The male agent stepped forward, unfolding a small folder as if it might somehow soften the blow. "We didn't contact you immediately because he couldn't tell us who he was. Not at first. The breakthrough only came recently, when fragments of his identity started resurfacing. Names, places, a photo of a farm triggered something." He passed the folder to Lisa. She barely registered the grainy satellite image of Daniel's body being airlifted from the jungle. "We have to be honest," the woman said. "He may never fully recover. He might need lifelong care. But we want you to know, the government will cover everything. You won't have to fight this alone." Lisa's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her disbelief. "Why would the government cover a lifetime of care?" she asked carefully. "No offense, but that's not exactly standard protocol." Before either agent could respond, Luke spoke, his voice hoarse, breaking at the edges. "Because it was my fault." He didn't look at her as the words came out, his face collapsing under the weight of guilt too long carried. "He was wearing my jacket that night." Lisa's breath caught. The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Tucker stepped in, his tone shifting from bureaucratic to something graver. "During the weeks after Daniel went missing, we began noticing a pattern. Special ops soldiers from various allied countries disappearing without a trace. At first, it looked random, isolated incidents. But eventually, we realized they were being targeted, taken. He paused. By the time we connected the dots, it was too late. Lisa stared at him, stunned. We believe Daniel was mistaken for Luke, Tucker continued. It was dark. He had Luke's Air Force Academy jacket on, same height, and the jacket concealed Daniel's build. They took him instead. He didn't have to say who they were. Not yet. Not with the storm already gathering in her chest. The bodies in that grave, he added quietly, belonged to the others. The ones who didn't make it. Special forces, tactical intelligence, vanished from 6 countries. Daniel was the only one left alive. Lisa sat down hard on the arm of a chair, her legs numb. He doesn't remember any of it, the female agent said gently. But his body tells a different story. There are signs: deep trauma, repeated fractures, restraints, nerve damage. It's consistent with prolonged torture. The room tilted slightly. Lisa gripped the fabric under her fingertips just to stay upright. The woman, Agent Reyes, shifted forward on the couch, her voice quiet but urgent. We know we don't have the right to ask this, but we need to keep this in the family. No press, no rumors. We're going to find the people who did this. They're going to pay, but not in a way the world will ever hear about. Lisa looked between them, her voice quiet, cautious. So what exactly are you asking from us? Agent Reyes didn't flinch. We craft a story, something clean. He ran away, fell off a boat, spent months in a coma in some under-resourced clinic overseas. It's not bulletproof, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to keep him safe. In exchange, Daniel will receive lifetime medical care and a full military pension. Lisa blinked. A pension? Her voice rose with disbelief. He's 15 years old. He hasn't even started working yet. That's when she saw it. Just a flicker, a soft shift in Agent Reyes's expression, a tightening around the eyes, a sadness too practiced to be personal, but not quite impersonal either. And Lisa understood. She wasn't offering compensation. She was offering an end. The future Daniel might have had, the one with college, first love, learning to drive, laughing too loud at midnight with his niece, that future was gone. And this was the government's way of saying, we know. Lisa's next question came out in a whisper, hoarse with guilt. It was the one she should have asked first. Where is he now? When can we talk to him? When can we bring him home? Agent Reyes met her gaze, kind but measured. He's in a secure rehabilitation facility just outside of Atlanta. It's quiet, heavily protected, and equipped for high-level trauma recovery. His doctors say he's progressing faster than expected, physically and mentally, but emotionally. She trailed off, then steadied her tone. We think phone calls can start soon, maybe within a week or 2. Visits, if all goes well, could follow in the next few weeks. Reyes glanced toward the hallway. Should we stay and speak to his parents? We can brief them, answer questions. No, Luke said suddenly, cutting her off. His voice was raw but steady. It's a family matter. I'll tell them. His jaw tightened as he stood. Lisa watched him walk down the hall, the wooden floorboards creaking under his heavy footsteps. Her mind raced. Daniel was alive. It was a miracle. But it was a miracle that came with a price tag, a lifetime of medical care, of silent suffering, and a lifetime of lies. She looked down at the folder in her hands, the satellite image of Daniel's broken body, a stark reminder of what he had endured, and what he might endure still.
Visiting day, 3 months later.
The hospital sat on a tree-lined ridge outside Atlanta, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the overcast sky. From a distance, it looked more like a tech campus or a luxury rehab facility. But the perimeter fencing, camera turrets, and the unmarked security patrols told a quieter truth. This was where the government put people it didn't quite know what to do with. People who shouldn't be alive. People like Daniel. Inside, the consultation room was sterile but not unkind. Soft lighting, pale green walls, calming prints of forests and river stones. A pitcher of water sat untouched on a polished end table beside a stack of government-issued literature on trauma, reintegration, and adaptive therapy. No one reached for it. Lisa sat on the edge of her chair, fingers twisted in the hem of her cardigan. Luke paced in slow, tight arcs across the far wall, one hand raking through his hair. Caroline perched on the very front of the couch, purse clutched tight in her lap. Only Thomas remained still, arms folded, back straight, his silence a thundercloud waiting to break. The door opened. Dr. Mia Alvarez entered briskly, her smile warm but measured. She wore fitted navy scrubs and a departmental fleece with a patch on the chest that read, Veteran Recovery Unit 6A. A lanyard with her badge trailed from one pocket, swinging slightly as she moved. "Thank you all for coming," she said, nodding to each of them. "I know it's been a long wait." She sat across from them, placing a slim tablet on the table and folding her hands. "I want to start by saying that Daniel is safe. He's stable. He's eating, sleeping, participating in therapy, and he's made progress, a lot of progress." 4 pairs of eyes locked onto her. No one breathed. "I also need to be clear. He doesn't know you're here today. That was my call. I didn't want to tell him in advance and risk triggering a spiral. Sometimes the idea of reunion can be more destabilizing than the reunion itself. He's in a good place right now. I wanted to protect that." Lisa swallowed. "So, you said he's made progress?" Dr. Alvarez nodded. "Yes, more than we expected." A pause. Then, "What kind of progress?" Thomas asked, his voice low, roughened by age and something deeper. Dr. Alvarez took a breath. "Physically, he's still healing. He'll always carry pain, nerve damage, some scarring, but he's mobile, independent. He pushes himself hard in therapy, sometimes too hard." She glanced at Luke. He doesn't like to show weakness. Luke frowned, his arms folding across his chest. That doesn't sound like him. "Perhaps not the Daniel you knew," Dr. Alvarez agreed, "but trauma changes people. Survival changes people." Lisa leaned forward slightly. "And emotionally?" Dr. Alvarez hesitated, not dramatically, just long enough for the air to shift. Then carefully she said, "He's more than functional. He's engaged, curious. He participates in group therapy sessions. He's surprisingly social in his own way." Lisa stared. "He talks?" Dr. Alvarez smiled gently. "Yes, he talks." A stunned silence fell over the room. And then softly, barely above a whisper, Caroline finally spoke. "My baby. He's talking to strangers and in public?" Dr. Alvarez's eyes softened. "Yes, ma'am, he talks. He listens. He leads. But honestly, he doesn't consider anyone here a stranger." That drew a blink from Luke. "Leads?" Dr. Alvarez nodded, her smile turning slightly amused. "Around here, they call him Commander Taylor." Lisa blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" The doctor leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "It started a couple months ago. The other patients here, many of them are veterans, special forces, people who've been through the worst of it. They just started gravitating to him. When someone's having a rough day, when a resident won't cooperate with physical therapy, it's Daniel who gets through to them. Sometimes with empathy, sometimes with, let's say, firm persuasion." Luke gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Daniel hates the military. He used to get mad just hearing me talk about drills. He wouldn't even look at my uniform." Lisa was still trying to process it. He's barely verbal. He only really opens up to me." Dr. Alvarez didn't dismiss them. She just let the silence sit for a moment before speaking. "Neither of those things are true anymore," she said quietly. The words hit harder than if she'd shouted them. Lisa's mouth opened, then closed. Her fingers trembled in her lap. Dr. Alvarez's tone turned clinical. but not cold. Whatever happened to him during those weeks, we may never know the full story. He doesn't remember it, at least not consciously. But his body, his instincts, his coping mechanisms, they're not the same as before. He adapted. He became the kind of person who could survive what others didn't. But that kind of transformation doesn't come without cost. She looked around the room, meeting each gaze with quiet seriousness. I don't say this to scare you. I say it so you understand. The Daniel you knew, he's still in there. But you're not meeting the boy who disappeared 6 months ago. You're meeting the young man who came back. Lisa felt her throat constrict, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. She looked at Luke, then at her in-laws, and realized that in this moment, they were all the same. Just a family who had lost a piece of themselves, trying to reconcile the impossible. They'd come to see a boy, a lost son, brother. But the man who was coming was a stranger to them all. We're ready, Caroline said, her voice steady but her eyes shone with unshed tears. Take us to him. Dr. Alvarez nodded, standing. Follow me then. And with that, the family followed, each step carrying them further into a future they never could have imagined. The doctor led them down a quiet, beige-walled hallway, the sound of their footsteps muted by the soft industrial carpet. They passed a water fountain, its gentle gurgle a counterpoint to the tension humming in Lisa's veins. He's in a group session now, Dr. Alvarez said, glancing back at them. I want you to observe first, to see how he is with others. Then, when the time is right, we'll introduce you. Lisa nodded, her heart thumping in her ears. Dr. Alvarez led them down a quiet hallway lined with frosted glass panels and soft, recessed lighting. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and eucalyptus. Clean, clinical, but trying too hard to feel like home. None of them spoke as they walked. Lisa's heart pounded in her ears. Caroline clutched Thomas's arm without realizing it. Luke trailed behind, his hands in his pockets, shoulders drawn tight. At the end of the hall, Alvarez paused beside a doorway and placed a hand gently on the frame. He's in there, she said softly. It's a communal rec space. Most of the patients spend time there during unscheduled hours. I thought it might be better for you to see him before he sees you. Let you take a moment. No one objected. She pushed the door open quietly, and they stepped into the room. It was large, sunlit, with a broad wall of windows looking out onto a courtyard filled with pines and hummingbirds. A few chairs, recovery equipment, and modular couches were arranged in clusters. Bookshelves lined the far wall. A large table sat near the windows where a few patients were scattered, reading or talking softly. And then, there he was. Daniel sat at the edge of one of the long tables, legs tucked neatly under him, posture slightly hunched forward in concentration. He was leaner now, taller, sharper at the jaw, his hair cropped close. But there was no mistaking him. His hands moved gracefully over a tablet screen, guiding the woman seated beside him through some kind of software. His voice was calm, focused. You see, Tracy? With your good hand and the voice recognition software, your input rate's already ahead of your pre-injury baseline. The algorithms compensate for latency, so you're effectively running faster than you were before. The woman beside him, late 20s maybe, with short, jagged dark hair and the raw pink sheen of healing burns covering the left side of her face, grinned crookedly. Her left wrist ended in a rounded scar where the hand used to be, but she handled the tablet with deft efficiency. Kid, Tracy spoke with almost a shy drawl, if you had any idea what I could do with my good hand and this mouth, you'd be asking me for more than my damn fruit cups. She finished in mock seduction. Caroline audibly gasped. Thomas blinked. Lisa's eyes went wide. And Luke nearly choked, coughing into his hand as he tried to swallow a laugh that refused to stay buried. But what stunned them all wasn't Tracy's boldness. It was Daniel, laughing. He shot her a look, smirking. If I ever ask for anything involving that mouth, he said dryly, please inform medical that I've suffered catastrophic brain trauma. Tracy barked a laugh and tossed a napkin at him. Daniel caught it midair without looking. Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. Lisa didn't breathe. Luke whispered under his breath, "He's okay?" But even as the words left his mouth, he knew this wasn't the Daniel they remembered. This was someone else. Someone who could laugh, who could heal others, who could talk. "I know it's hard to understand, Doctor," Alvarez said, her voice low, kind. "Trauma can change people in profound ways. Sometimes it takes time to reconcile who they were with who they've become." "But he's happy?" Lisa asked, her voice breaking. "He's whole?" And yet somehow he was. A voice cut through the low murmur of the room, loud enough to carry, edged with amusement. "Hey, Jackson," a patient lounging nearby called out, grinning. "Mind saying that a little louder? Pretty sure Taylor's family over there didn't catch the full show." The words hit like a shockwave. Tracy froze mid-laugh. Daniel went still, fingers hovering above the tablet. Then both turned. 4 pairs of eyes met theirs from across the room. Caroline's wide and wet, Thomas rigid and unreadable, Luke somewhere between stunned and overwhelmed, and Lisa, frozen in the doorway, breath caught between past and present. Daniel didn't say anything at first. His jaw and for a heartbeat his face clouded. Not with fear or shame, but with something far more vulnerable. Regret. His hand moved slowly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a worn baseball cap, black, frayed at the brim, and quietly tugged it down over his head, like a boy hiding from a storm. Then, softly, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't want you to see that." Caroline's heart shattered and stitched itself back together in the same breath. He was taller now, older, different, but still hers. She stepped forward, not crying, not anymore. She crossed the space like it was sacred ground, and when she stopped in front of him, she reached up and gently took the brim of his cap, lifting it just enough to see his eyes. "You're here," she said, her voice steady. "That's all I see." And Daniel, his throat tight, could only nod. Daniel hugged each of them in turn, one by one. Caroline held him like she was trying to remember the feel of his bones. Thomas's hug was firm, wordless, the kind that said more than anything he could have spoken. Lisa lingered, her eyes wet, forehead resting against his for a long, quiet second. And finally, Luke stepped forward, arms wide. They embraced in silence, Luke pulling him in tight, Daniel holding on with surprising strength. When they finally stepped back, there was a moment of stillness. Something unsaid passed between them, years of guilt, fear, brotherhood. Then they both nodded and let it be. But before anyone could speak again, Daniel's eyes drifted downward, to the patch on Luke's chest. The insignia. His breath caught. His entire posture shifted. Without a word, Daniel turned sharply toward the rest of the rec room and called out, voice clear and commanding, "Officer on deck!" The room snapped to attention. Patients who'd been sitting suddenly stood, chairs scraping against the floor. Those already standing straightened further, shoulders back, chests out. Even the laughter that had been hovering in the room moments ago seemed to vanish, replaced by a respectful quiet. A few were confined to chairs or prosthetic rigs, but every one of them straightened, postures lifted, heads up, eyes forward. Tracy, startled, let out a soft curse and gave Daniel a mock glare as she threw up a salute. "Damn it, Taylor, you never told me your brother had bars." Luke blinked, stunned. "What the—" he started before catching himself. He waved a hand and gave a half smile, clearly thrown but trying to keep it light. "Relax, everyone, I'm not on duty. No salute necessary." Daniel didn't move. He looked at Luke, not with defiance but quiet certainty. "They're still soldiers, Luke. Maybe injured, maybe retired, but no one here has earned the right to salute more than them." A pause. Then, from behind Caroline, Thomas spoke, his voice low, steady. "Damn right they have." Luke looked around the room, at the burns, the scars, The missing limbs, the eyes that still carried weight and discipline. He stood a little straighter. "You're right," he said quietly. Then he stepped forward and offered a proper salute to the room. Crisp, clean, respectful. "Thank you for your service." And then one by one he moved through the room, shaking each hand, thanking each soldier. When he got back to Daniel, he hugged him again, this time not just as a brother, but as someone he respected. From across the room, Dr. Alvarez watched with folded arms and a smile that said, "I told you so." When Luke caught her eye, she gave the smallest of nods. This was his unit. These were his men and women. And Daniel Taylor, Commander Taylor, was already leading them. The room, once filled with easy chatter and casual teasing, had settled into something quieter, something reverent. The Taylors took seats along the edge of the rec space as the other soldiers slowly gathered, some in wheelchairs, some on crutches, some with bandages still peeking from beneath sleeves and collars. One by one they came forward, drawn not by protocol but by something deeper. Each had something to say. The first was a man named Reyes, a Marine with a prosthetic leg and a photo of 2 young daughters taped to the back of his therapy clipboard. "I was ready to quit," he said plainly, nodding at Daniel. 3 weeks after I got here, I stopped showing up to PT. Said I was done trying to stand on one foot just to please a bunch of bureaucrats. Thought I was never going to walk again." He looked down, shook his head. "This kid came to my room, didn't knock, just wheeled in a whiteboard and started drawing mechanical equations. Said if I could argue with his math, I could quit therapy. I couldn't." He grinned. "I'm walking now. Kinda pissed about it, actually." Laughter rippled through the room. Next came a woman in her 40s, Army Ranger insignia still faintly visible on the sleeve of her worn hoodie. "He sat with me the night I almost pulled my IV out," she said quietly. "Didn't talk, just played chess. Every time I made a move, he'd ask me what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I told him to stop asking. He didn't. Eventually, I ran out of excuses." She paused, eyes glistening. "I'm still figuring out the rest of my life, but I'm here because I don't want to run anymore. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him." Another soldier, this one younger, barely out of his 20s, stepped up with trembling hands. "I had night terrors," he admitted. "Still do sometimes. But when it was bad, Daniel would leave his door open. Just open. No words. Just in case I needed to sit with someone who didn't need to talk." He looked at Caroline. "Your boy knows how to see people." Lisa sat with her hand to her mouth, eyes wet. Caroline squeezed Thomas's hand so hard his knuckles paled. Then came the last voice. "Tracy." She didn't stand, didn't need to. The room naturally quieted as she leaned forward in her chair, fingers drumming the side of her tablet, her expression a tangle of defiance and fragility. It's not every day that a battle-scarred, broken woman finds her salvation in the eyes of a 15-year-old boy who looks like he should be worried about algebra homework instead of saving lives. A few in the room chuckled gently, but her voice didn't waver. "My wife left me," she said flatly. "Said she didn't sign up for all this. The burns, the missing hand, the nightmares, the silence." She lifted her scarred arm slightly. "Said she loved me, but not this version of me." Daniel looked down at the table. "She didn't mean it cruel," Tracy added. "I think she just didn't know how to love someone who didn't know how to love herself." She paused, took a breath. "I didn't think I'd come back. Not really. I was still breathing, but I wasn't here. I was done. Bitter. Angry. And then this punk kid with the driest sense of humor I've ever met sits down across from me one night and tells me my problem is simple." She grinned now despite herself. "Says, your operating system was built for war. You just need a firmware update for peace." A few people laughed again, softer this time, more real. Tracy's eyes glossed, but she didn't blink them away. "I don't know how he did it," she said, "but somehow he made me want to come back, to fight again. Not just in here." She tapped her chest, but out there, among people, among the broken pieces. She turned toward Daniel and swallowed. "I'm going home next week," she said. "Not back to her. That door's closed. But I'm going home knowing I'm still me, that I survived, that I matter." Then she looked at Caroline, at Lisa, at Thomas and Luke. "You didn't just get your son back," she said. "You got back a kid who saved most of the people in this room. That's more than most officers do in a whole career." Daniel said nothing. He didn't nod, didn't smile. He just stared at the floor, quiet and still, like someone afraid that if he spoke, it might all come undone. Dr. Alvarez stood off to the side, watching it all unfold, her arms crossed loosely. When Lisa turned to look at her, the doctor gave a single, knowing smile. "She didn't say 'I told you so.' She didn't need to.